We know how Donald Trump won in 2016. The messaging.
We're going to build a wall.
The candidate.
Make America great again.
And the opponent.
Crooked Hillary Clinton.
All that led to an astonishing electoral upset fueled by an energized Trump base and a depressed Democratic turnout. But you probably don't know that the Trump campaign tried to deter more than 3.5 million black voters to secure his victory. Channel 4 News has seen a secret database created by the Trump campaign containing personal information of tens of millions of US voters. Our investigation has found that the Trump campaign harvested that data to target groups of voters in key battleground states, including people they wanted to persuade not to vote for Donald Trump, but not to vote at all. They were labelled deterrents and were disproportionately black US citizens.
That is mind-boggling.
And many of those classified as deterrents ended up not turning out to vote in 2016. This 21st century type of voter interference might have swung the election for Donald Trump, and it could happen again in 2020. This investigation comes off the back of months of work by Channel 4 News, and you should definitely watch the full report, and there's a link in the description below. But in this video, I want to try and break down for you the key tactics of the Trump campaign and why it's so important ahead of the 2020 election. Channel 4 News has exclusively seen a huge cache of secret data which reveals the personal information of tens of millions of American voters gathered by Donald Trump's team. We're not just talking about date of birth and addresses, but everything from personal finances to eating habits, even a score for personality. But the crucial bit, what do you do with all that information? In 16 battleground states in 2016, the Trump team's algorithm took all of that information and placed voters into one of 8 categories. Most likely to turn out was the base. Call Trump on his side, call Clinton on hers. Those least likely to vote were marked as deadbeats. And then the disengaged for both sides. In the middle were the swing voters who might go either way and were open to persuasion. And then the final 2 groups, both crucial to Donald Trump. Those leaning towards him were called GOTV, get out the vote. And on the other side, deterrence, voters that could be encouraged not to vote at all. And the campaign would then create ads that could target those people through Facebook and other platforms. Many were dark posts, which could appear on people's Facebook feeds and then vanish. What we found is that in those crucial swing states, black Americans were disproportionately categorized for deterrence. In Georgia, they made up 32% of the population, but 61% of the deterrents. In North Carolina, 22% of the population, but 46% of deterrents. And in Michigan, 15% of people, but 33% of deterrents. In total, more than 3.5 million black voters were marked for deterrence. If you include other ethnic minorities, they made up 54% of the deterrence segment. But what did this campaign look like on the ground? Let's focus on one swing state, Wisconsin. Here, nearly 3 million people cast the ballot in 2016, and Donald Trump won the state by just 23,000 votes. And how close was that? He won by just 0.77% of the vote. Afterwards, he boasted that black voters in the state that have historically backed Democratic candidates had helped him to win.
And you know what else? They didn't come out to vote for Hillary. They didn't come out.
Black turnout in Wisconsin collapsed by 19%. Plenty of pundits and politicians have given their views on why that happened, but most point to Barack Obama not being on the ticket and Hillary Clinton being unpopular in comparison. So what if you had a way of identifying people who had voted in 2012, but could be persuaded not to go out and vote this time around? Our investigation allows us to see just how focused the Trump database could be with their ads on Facebook and other social media. Take Ward 116. The Trump campaign was aware of 1,440 potential voters here. 80% were black. Almost half of the ward was marked for deterrence. That's 636 people. So how many of those black deterrence voters actually turned out on election day? We went through the records, and it was just 36%. The overall turnout fell from 75% in 2012 to just 56%. And this wasn't restricted to one ward. Annette Clinton was marked for deterrence in Ward 111, where turnout also dropped in 2016.
How do you feel about the idea that the Trump campaign categorized you and lots of other people as deterrents?
I don't feel right by that at all, because they shouldn't have to categorize no one in order to get votes.
Black people were disproportionately represented. There were many more black people on that list than there should have been, proportionally. What do you think that tells you?
That the black community is targeted. You know, it shouldn't be like that, that they would use you and categorize you to make it harder for you to vote.
Does knowing this change anything about how you feel about the last election?
It makes me want to go out and vote more, actually.
One of the most damaging attacks used against Hillary Clinton with black voters was this one.
Super predators, no conscience, no empathy.
These messages were pumped out across the airwaves, the internet, and into black communities. We found the campaign spent $55,000 targeting the message at black voters in Georgia alone. Manan Sabir was on the deterrence list.
My thoughts was that she was supporting black men going to prison.
I mean, let me show you one of the commercials, the Super Predators commercial.
They are often the kinds of...
They were targeted at you.
Oh, probably targeted all the way.
Isn't it possible that some of that advertising influenced you at the time?
It's possible that it influenced somebody, but it doesn't influence me. Like
you feel confident it wouldn't have done?
I'm almost like 100% sure.
Can you really be 100% sure that advertising doesn't influence you? I mean, we all say that, don't we?
We all do.
Channel 4 News showed our findings to local state senator Lena Taylor.
That is mind-boggling. I'm like shocked that they had in 2016 all the way down to we need to deter that one.
The Trump campaign has always denied that it targeted voters with attack ads like this.
We didn't run any kind of suppression and/or campaigns in any way that ran to. I don't think we didn't run out a campaign. I believe I would say I'm nearly 100% sure we did not run any campaigns that targeted even African Americans.
We can't tell you how many messages were targeted at black voters, what was in them, because Facebook won't tell us. What we know is the Trump campaign spent $44 million on Facebook and pumped out almost 6 million different ads. The company claims it does everything it can to stop misinformation and voter suppression online, but they have chosen to keep the ads used in the 2016 campaign secret. For critics, the lack of transparency feeds into concerns about this year's election and people's voting rights.
Somebody has worked this hard to strategically disenfranchise you, to discourage you. What it should tell people is the power, right, of their vote.
Like I said earlier, please go and watch the full investigation linked in the description below to learn about who was behind the secret database and hear more from voters who were targeted. But to end this video, let's just talk briefly about why it matters that voters are being targeted like this. Remember the history of the fight for voting rights in the United States. Back during the Jim Crow era, after the Civil War and Reconstruction, black Americans were stopped from voting in many states by clearly undemocratic and racist acts. That was stopped in 1965 with the Voting Rights Bill. But when part of that was struck down by the Supreme Court in 2013, new barriers were put in their way in some states. Voter ID laws, the purging of electoral rolls, and the closure of polling stations. Many Democrats and civil rights activists are fighting against this voter suppression right now. But our investigation, this new information, shows a subtle and secret campaign that aims to stop people going out and casting their ballot. While many will vote by mail this year due to the coronavirus pandemic, many black voters will wait until polling day. And right up to November the 3rd, they could be receiving targeted adverts trying to stop them from exercising their democratic right. US elections are often won in swing states by tiny, tiny margins. So all this micro-targeting, all this data collection is vital. What Channel 4 News' investigation has found is not just applicable to Milwaukee and Wisconsin, but to Atlanta, Chicago, Miami, Richmond, and Cleveland. This is the 21st century battle for voting rights in the United States.